Okay, we're going to start the video off here with the Italian Vetterli 1870 single shot rifles. Now, I do not have a full-length rifle version yet, but I do have two Troupe Specials, which are here. And basically the difference between this and the rifle is the Troupe Specials are slightly lighter. The barrels are 9, almost 10 inches shorter, so the overall length of the weapon's a tad bit shorter, which makes it lighter. And it only has one barrel band where the rifle would still have two. But it does take the same bayonet. These, you can't call them carbines, they're more short rifles. And TS stands for Troupe Special, which they were supposed to be issued to artillerymen, sergeants, logistic supplies of the Alpini troops. So there were certain jobs that were not so much frontline combat that would be issued these rifles. But I believe they are the same as the full-length rifle, the 1870 rifle. It's just they're the shorter version. So we'll take a look at them and discuss the history of these guns. First thing I'd like to say before we get started here is if you have any interest at all in purchasing or collecting Italian Vetterli rifles, be it the 1870, 1870/87, or the 1870/87/15, which is the one in 6.5 Carcano, buy this book. This book, I did a review on it, goes in depth into the history of Italian rifles and explains all the versions, the slings, ammo, accessories, everything. It's well worth it and gives a history of these guns. Okay, even if you're not into these real old, unusual ones, if you like the more newer ones, I see a lot of people now, because Carcanos are popular, buying the 6.5s. This book is worth it, and it'll save you a lot of time and trouble. If you read it, you will understand what you're looking at before you buy any of these old guns. So it's kind of imperative you educate yourself before you go out and start spending a ton of money. Now also, any of these Vetterli style guns, be it these Italian ones, I believe the Swiss may have had a dust cover on them, but I don't know, but the Italian ones do. Either these early single shots, or you will find the carbine versions, okay, which were never converted, a lot of them, that are more common than these. One very important thing, the bolt comes out much like the Swiss Vetterli, which we're all familiar with. You tap it up here and drive that, to get the bolt out, you have to move this wedge that locks the bolt in, much like on the Swiss Vetterli. So here's this wedge here. But when you have this sliding sheet metal cover, okay, this dust cover, alright, there's a notch down here. What you would have to do is push this and make sure, okay, I'll get it lined up, hold on here. Make sure that that wedge lines up with that notch there, so when you tap it out, you will not damage the dust cover. It's like you see on this here, part of that wedge is still underneath, and you see this damage here, these dents. That's where somebody tried, this one the little tab's missing, somebody tried knocking it off. Make sure you do this, because you will not find replacement parts for guns this unusual and this old. Make sure you understand that before you go and try to disassemble this gun. The first thing someone's going to do is try to get the bolt out, look down the bore, and make sure, and basically it comes off when they're closed, not open. Okay. Very important. Alright, now let's take a look at these guns here. Alright, when you read the book, it explains about the history of Italy, and at the time these guns were adopted, Italy was just unified into one nation with a king other than an assembly of city-states. So it was fairly a new country as is, or a new government. And they were standardizing for the army. So the Italians wanted a new gun after, the era of muzzle-loading guns. They had the Carcano needle fire as a stopgap measure, but they wanted to modernize their weapons. So they did trials and tests, and like all countries, they take all examples from all over the world and everyone that's producing supposedly the best and greatest. And they did like the Vetterli. Now, they did test the Swiss Vetterli. Why did they not adopt it? Well, I think it comes down to the Vetterli shortcomings. When I did my video on the Vetterli, I have two cartridges here. This is my replica of a Swiss Vetterli, 38 millimeter case, and this is the Italian 47 millimeter case. The bullets weigh the same, and I can find that the military charge was like 62 grains of black powder for the Italian Vetterli, but I cannot find a reference anywhere how much black powder went into the 38 millimeter Swiss Vetterli. But obviously it must be less. So, number one, the Italians probably didn't think the cartridge was powerful enough, and making a larger cartridge in the black powder days, which would explain the difference between the 38 millimeter case length and 47 millimeter case length between the two cartridges. It looks like the Italians wanted a more powerful cartridge. And another thing, even if you wanted to put that into a Swiss Vetterli, the added length would mean you would have to make the gun bigger in the receiver area, which would probably throw the whole engineering off. It was kind of, even though it loaded quick, operated quick, and could fire quick, it was fairly a cumbersome weapon. That's the downfall of it. So the Italians also, this is kind of like when the Italians adopted the Carcano rifle in 1891. They went around, looked at stuff, decided on the Mannlicher system, paid to use that system, paid a license to manufacture it, but they developed their own cartridge and changed it in a little bit different ways. There was other things that were non-standard that only the Italians did. The Italians had been manufacturing arms and munitions for many years, and they were good at it. They had engineers in that. So I believe what they did is they liked the Vetterli, they liked the bolt idea, so they took it, they modified it, and they kept it in a single shot with a little bit more powerful cartridge, which makes sense. Also, one thing the Italian guns do have is the Italian guns have a safety where the Swiss Vetterlis do not. Okay, so that's one design change. So this particular model here is a very early model. And how do we know this? Well, first of all, when you look at it, there are no markings on the outside of this barrel whatsoever. None. Okay, has the dust cover and that. It has the second type of rear sight, okay, other than the, there was another type similar to this, but that was only on the prototypes. Once they got into the regulation, this was the sight that they used, this one here. And you can tell by the sliders and also there should be graduations on this. on one side and the other for your range. And also, what is interesting is this is a very early version, because if you look here, the TS's use the same bayonet as the rifle. So what went on the rifle would go on this. In this particular one, you have the lug, and you have, I think they call this a tenon. You have this little additional piece. The very early Vetterli bayonets, even on the rifle, had this little extra support on the barrel. So when you put the knife bayonet on, this would give it a little more support and stability. Well, later on they decided that was unnecessary, and as you see on this one here a little bit later, it was removed. Okay, so this is a very early version of the gun, this one on the top. Also, the only place you find a serial number on these is on this lug, bayonet lug. Now, like in the book, the guy says, oh, well, I found these guns that they had no markings, no nothing on them whatsoever, no serial numbers. Well, he's kind of wrong, and we're going to go over that once we get into the next video where we disassemble these guns. Now, this one down here on the bottom is a little bit different. He mentions this in the book. Now, if you look there, I think this one was an early contract that, I'll get the name of the maker here. Alright, I'm not pronouncing this right. Glicenti Brescia. There's that stamped on the top there, the flat, and the rampant lion, which is their company's symbol. So this one was done a little bit later, and this does have some markings and numbers on the flats. Okay, so this one here is a little bit different, or later model. Now, if you read the book, there's different sights, different safeties on here, and these are these are not the earliest type. They had a complex thing that was in the bolt handle. When you see it in the book, I forget what they call that safety, and it would have a switch down here in the trigger guard where you'd push it and it disengaged the safety. These particular safeties are the ones when they standardize the model. These safeties are called the Claverno safeties, after, I think it's Captain or Colonel Antonio Claverno designed this safety. And these were used on all the early models. They were later replaced with another safety done by none other than Giuseppe Vitali. Okay, he redesigned the safeties on these guns, and I'll show you on a later version here side by side. Though it is similar, like I said, a little wedge comes out. It is very similar to the Swiss Vetterli Action, but it is different. The parts will not interchange. Okay, so if you try to take parts off an Italian Vetterli and try putting on a Swiss, they're not the same size. They won't interchange. And basically the difference, I mean the cap, the nose, the way the bolt locks into the receiver is all fairly the same. Okay, much like the Swiss Vetterli, other than the ejection port's at an angle. There's a little bit difference in the extractor. It's similar, but it functions a little bit different. And where you have that striker rod that goes to that forked firing pin, this one goes straight through to center fire. Okay, and the bolt also is different in those terms. And there's that little nub down there, I think you can see it, where it would kick the case out once you go all the way back with the bolt. Okay, and it's a single shot version, so very, very similar. Dust cover has the I guess they call this a Knox form barrel, these flats on there. These are older style sights. And like I said, the only difference between this and the rifle is these only have one barrel band instead of two, and I think the overall length is 10 inches shorter. But it'd be the same thing as the rifle. Now this model, like I said, has some markings on it, but basically the same in the later style bayonet mount. Now this one has a cleaning rod, which I believe is correct, so that's the cleaning rod that you'd want in there. Alright, there's a look at the Vetterli bolt disassembled. As you see, very similar to the Swiss Vetterli. Okay. There's another drawing. Now let's take a look at the different sights. Alright, this photograph here shows you the 4 different sights that would be on the gun. The very early one there in the upper left, the one we have to the right. Then for the black powder cartridges, one type of sight, and then they changed it, which you will find on the 7087s for the smokeless powder round. And there's a nice picture of the sight we have on those two. Okay, version 2. There's the M90 sight for the smokeless powder. And there's the older style sight that would have went on a rifle. And I've seen some of these Troupe Specials with this sight here. Okay. And there's basically your differences. Okay, we have the second one there. Then that rear sight leaf, when they had the older ammo, the Vecchi sight, and then the M90 sight, and then your 6.5 sight. So that's basically the progression of the different rear sights that you will find on these guns. Okay, so basically pretty straightforward. You open the bolt up, draw it back, put a cartridge in, close it. Now, this has the cocking indicator like the Vetterli. You know the gun is cocked now. Okay, pretty simple action. Now, how does this Claverno safety work? Well, you would open the gun, place a cartridge in, close it. You would push the safety forward. And then when you lower the bolt, what it does is it drops the pressure, it drops the firing pin down in a controlled state. The only problem with this older safety was now you had the firing pin resting against the cartridge. So if you bash this gun or dropped it, it could cause an accidental discharge. How you would fire the weapon, you pull it up, cock it, and then the gun would fire. Okay, so again, load the gun, push the safety forward. When you come down with it, it releases it, and it would just be a matter of lifting the bolt handle up and letting it go. This safety functions to where it's in the safe position. You close the bolt, it releases tension on the firing pin and goes back into the fire position. Alright, but the Italians found that this safety had problems, so they had to change it. So let's look at what they changed it to. Now we'll look at this model 7087. And again, other than the magazine, there's a safety here. You would load the gun, but the way this works is you would push the safety up, okay, before you close it. Then when you close the bolt and come down, the bolt drops down on this safety. It doesn't go all the way back. There's a little like notch under there. We'll put it on a table and take a closer look. So then what you would do is open it up, try to hold this. This goes back on itself on spring pressure, cocks the gun, and goes, then you can fire. So and as you see, what it's doing is holding the firing pin back off the primer. And then you would just lift the bolt, this drops out of the way, down, you are cocked, you can see the indicator, and the gun fires. Alright, looking at the guns, there is a visual difference from the outside. You know, even though it's different, if you can see, it's very, very different, the shape of the safeties. Okay? Now that's a look at them when the bolt's open and in the rearward position. This earlier Claverno style, and then the one designed by Vetterli. If you notice, there's this little hook here, and the shape is different. Because when this one goes forward, into the forward position. Okay, now watch the trigger also. I push this forward, kind of disengages the trigger. Let's see what this one does. Get up in here, push this forward. Yep, that's disengaging the trigger also. It's hard for me to get that. Hold on. Oh yeah, once you do that, it locks the trigger. But if you notice where this comes down, the bolt handle will rest on this. So the trigger's taken out of the way when you engage both of those safeties. But when you push this older one up and then close the bolt, it just lowers that, and now your trigger is free. That's all that does. Where this one, when we come up with it and close the bolt, you see this is still supporting the bolt. It keeps the firing pin from contacting the primer, and also they're both set right. They show that they are not cocked. Okay, we're going to do an overview of these 1870 TS rifles. Take a good look at them, and then the next video, what I'm going to do is going to go in to where we disassemble these guns. Alright, and I'm going to take them apart, take the bolts apart, and we're going to discuss markings, and also I'm going to include the safety regards of this. If you intend to shoot these guns, what you would want to check out on them to make sure that you are in a condition to fire, because when I got these they were not. There were some issues, and I'll discuss them, what to look for, and also show you how to basically disassemble the gun.